I was treated like an embarrassment at my wife's corporate gala. Her boss valued me, exposed her jealous meltdown, and I finally reclaimed my worth. Myself standing in the corner of this upscale downtown hotel ballroom, watching my wife of 8 years treat me like I was some embarrassing relative she had been forced to bring along. She had been doing this all evening. When her CO workers approached us, she would introduce me with this forced smile that never reached her eyes. "Oh, this is my husband," she would say, like she was apologizing for my existence. Then she would quickly steer the conversation away from me, talking about work projects and office gossip while I stood there like furniture. The worst part, I could see her colleagues sizing me up, wondering why this successful marketing director seemed ashamed of the man she married. I am not some loser she picked up at a gas station. I run my own consulting business. I am in decent shape. I dress well. But tonight, according to her body language, I might as well have shown up in sweatpants and flip-flops. "Honey, could you get me another wine?" she asked, not even looking at me while she laughed at something her CO worker was saying. It was not a request. It was a dismissal. I walked to the bar, ordering her usual Chardonnay and a whiskey for myself. The bartender, probably used to corporate events like this, made small talk about the weather. Even he treated me with more respect than my own wife had all evening. When the first returned with her drink, she was deep in conversation with 3 of her female colleagues about some client presentation. I stood there holding her wine like a waiter until she finally noticed and took it without acknowledgement. "We should probably mingle more," I suggested quietly. She shot me a look that could freeze hell. "I am mingling with my colleagues about work." The message was clear. I did not belong in her professional world. That is when I noticed her. The woman across the room who had been watching our interaction with obvious interest. Tall, confident, probably mid-30s, wearing a black dress that cost more than most people's car payments. Everything about her screamed executive leadership. She approached our group with the kind of presence that made conversations pause. "Ladies," she said, her voice carrying that natural authority that comes with corner offices and 7-figure salaries. "I hope you are all enjoying the party." My wife's entire demeanor shifted. Her back straightened. Her voice became more professional, more deferential. "Of course, we were just discussing the Henderson account." "Excellent. And you must be her husband," the woman said, extending her hand to me. Her handshake was firm, confident. "I have heard absolutely nothing about you, which is fascinating considering how much she talks about everything else in her life." The comment landed like a precision strike. My wife's face went pale. "I am the regional director," the woman continued, still holding my gaze. "I make it a point to know about the important people in my team members' lives. Yet somehow you remain a mystery." My wife jumped in quickly. "Well, he is very busy with his own work. Consulting? Very technical stuff." The way she said technical stuff made it sound like I fixed computers for a living. "Consulting in what field?" the regional director asked, genuinely interested. "Business optimization and efficiency systems," I replied. "I help companies streamline their operations and reduce overhead costs." Her eyebrows raised appreciatively. "Impressive. We could probably use someone like you here. Our quarterly efficiency reports have been disappointing." My wife looked like she had swallowed glass. "Oh, I do not think that would be appropriate," my wife said quickly. "Mixing business with personal relationships never works out well." "Interesting perspective," the director said, her tone cooler now, especially coming from someone who just spent 20 minutes talking about her personal vacation plans with the Henderson client contact. Another direct hit. My wife's professional facade was cracking. "If you will excuse me," the director said, "I need to make my rounds, but I do hope we can continue this conversation later." She looked directly at me when she said it. As she walked away, I could feel the shift in dynamics. My wife's colleagues were looking at her differently now, questioning why she had been so dismissive of someone her boss clearly found impressive. "What was that about?" one of them asked. "Nothing," my wife said, but her voice had lost its earlier confidence. "She is just being polite." But I knew better. And from the way my wife kept glancing nervously across the room, so did she. The evening was far from over, and something told me the real show was just beginning. 20 minutes later, my wife had wandered off to the dessert table with her group, leaving me by the windows overlooking the city. I was actually enjoying the brief respite from her embarrassed glances and dismissive comments when I heard heels clicking on marble behind me. "Quite a view from up here," the regional director said, joining me at the window. Up close, I could see she was even more striking than I had initially thought. Sharp features, intelligent eyes, and the kind of confidence that comes from never having to doubt your own worth. "It is," I agreed, though I have to admit the view inside has been more interesting tonight. She laughed, a genuine sound that contrasted sharply with my wife's forced social giggles I had been hearing all evening. Direct, I like that. It is refreshing in a room full of corporate diplomacy. Speaking of which, I said, that was quite the performance you put on earlier. Very smooth performance. She raised an eyebrow. I was simply making observations. Your wife seems to have some interesting perspectives on professional relationships. We stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the city lights below. Then she spoke again, her voice quieter but more intense. Can I ask you something? And I want a straight answer. Shoot. How long has she been treating you like you are invisible? The question caught me off guard, not because it was inappropriate, but because it was so accurate. What makes you think she does? 20 years in corporate leadership teaches you to read people. Body language, vocal patterns, social dynamics. Tonight, I have watched a woman systematically diminish her husband in front of her colleagues. The question is whether you are going to keep letting her. I turned to face her fully. That is a pretty bold assessment from someone who just met us. I have been watching her for months. She talks about everyone in her life except you. Her friends, her yoga instructor, her hairdresser, even her neighbor's dog, but never her husband. That tells me everything I need to know about how she values you. And what exactly do you think you know about my marriage? She moved closer, close enough that I could smell her perfume. I know that you are a successful professional who is being treated like an accessory. I know that you have more presence and intelligence in your little finger than half the people in this room, and I know that your wife is either blind or deliberately sabotaging the best thing she has. Her words hit harder than they should have, probably because they echoed thoughts I had been suppressing for months. You do not know me, I said, but my voice lacked conviction. I know enough. I know you run your own business, which means you have drive and independence. I know you are confident enough to hold your own in a room full of people who are trying to impress each other. And I know you are loyal enough to stand by someone who clearly does not appreciate what she has. She reached into her small clutch and pulled out a business card, but instead of handing it to me, she stepped even closer. I also know that loyalty has limits, she continued, her voice dropping to almost a whisper, and that some people do not realize what they have until it is gone. Before I could respond, she slipped the card into my jacket pocket, her fingers lingering just a moment longer than necessary. The gesture was intimate, deliberate, and completely unmistakable. What is that for? I asked, though I was pretty sure I knew. Consider it a professional opportunity, she said with a slight smile. We really could use someone with your expertise. But more than that, she paused, her eyes meeting mine directly. Consider it an opportunity to be valued by someone who recognizes quality when she sees it. The implication was crystal clear. If you ever want to experience what it feels like to be with a real woman who appreciates what she has, she continued, instead of one who is embarrassed by it, you have my number. I felt the weight of the card in my pocket like it was made of lead. That is quite an offer, I managed. It is not an offer. It is a reality check. The question is what you are going to do with the information. She started to turn away, then stopped. Oh, and one more thing. Your wife is about to come over here looking panicked because she has been watching us from across the room. How you handle the next few minutes will tell me everything I need to know about whether you are ready to stop being treated like a second-class citizen in your own marriage. I looked over, and sure enough, my wife was pushing through the crowd toward us, her face a mask of barely controlled anxiety. Showtime, the director said softly, then raised her voice back to normal conversation level. So, I will have my assistant send over those efficiency reports we discussed. I think you will find them very interesting. My wife reached us just as the director was finishing her sentence, slightly out of breath and obviously flustered. There you are, my wife said, her voice higher than usual. I was looking for you. Just discussing some potential business opportunities, I said calmly, enjoying the way her eyes widened slightly. The director smiled at both of us. Your husband has some very impressive ideas about operational efficiency. We should definitely explore a consulting arrangement. I could practically see the wheels turning in my wife's head, trying to figure out how to object without looking unprofessional in front of her boss. Well, my wife said carefully, we would have to think about that. There might be conflicts of interest. Really? The director asked, her tone innocent but her eyes sharp. What kind of conflicts? I would think you would be proud to have your husband's expertise recognized by your company. The trap was set and my wife walked right into it. Any objection she made now would sound exactly like what it was, embarrassment about her husband's involvement in her professional world. Of course, I would be proud, she said, but her smile looked painful. I just meant we would need to discuss it first, naturally. Well, I will leave you two to talk it over. Such an interesting evening. She walked away, leaving us standing there in the awkward silence that had become the soundtrack of our marriage. What did she want? My wife asked, trying to sound casual and failing completely. I patted my jacket pocket where the business card rested. Like she said, professional opportunities. But we both knew it was much more than that. My wife's paranoia kicked into overdrive after that conversation. For the next 30 minutes, she barely left my side, monitoring every interaction like a suspicious security guard. Every time someone approached us, she would insert herself into the conversation before I could say more than hello. But her vigilance had an unintended consequence. Her colleagues started noticing her bizarre behavior, the way she would practically drag me away whenever anyone showed interest in talking to me. What had started as embarrassment about her husband was now becoming embarrassment about her own actions. I was actually starting to enjoy watching her squirm when the regional director reappeared near the bar. My wife spotted her immediately and stiffened like she had seen a ghost. "I am going to get some air," I announced, walking toward the hotel's outdoor terrace. "Wait," my wife said, grabbing my arm. "Where are you going?" "To the terrace. Unless you need permission slips for me to walk around freely now." The sarcasm hit its mark. She released my arm, but followed me, clearly torn between not wanting to appear controlling and not wanting to leave me unsupervised. The terrace was quieter, with only a few other party guests enjoying the December evening air. City lights stretched out below us, and for a moment, I could almost forget the tension of the evening. "Look," my wife said. "I know tonight has been a little awkward, but you have to understand my position here. These people are my colleagues. I have to maintain a certain professional image, and apparently that image does not include acknowledging that your husband exists. That is not fair. I introduced you to everyone. You introduced me like I was some obligation you had to get through, like showing up with me was some kind of social embarrassment you had to manage." She opened her mouth to deny it, but we both knew it was true. That is when the regional director stepped onto the terrace, seemingly by coincidence. But I was beginning to understand that nothing this woman did was actually coincidental. "Beautiful night," she said, joining us at the railing, though a bit cold. "You might want to come back inside soon." My wife's entire body tensed. We were just finishing up our conversation. "No rush," the director said smoothly. "I actually wanted to continue our discussion about the consulting opportunity. I have been thinking about your efficiency optimization methods, and I have some specific challenges I would like to run by you." She stepped closer to me, close enough that anyone watching would notice the intimate proximity. My wife certainly did. "I think we could learn a lot from each other," the director continued, her voice taking on that same intimate tone from earlier. "Professional collaboration can be so rewarding when it is with the right person." My wife was practically vibrating with tension now, but she could not object without looking completely unprofessional in front of her boss. The director reached into her clutch again, this time pulling out a different business card. "This has my direct line," she said, moving to hand it to me. But as I reached for it, she accidentally dropped it, and we both bent to pick it up. For just a moment, as we straightened up, her hand brushed against mine, lingering just a second longer than necessary. It was subtle, but in the context of everything else that had happened tonight, it might as well have been a neon sign. That is when my wife completely lost it. "What the hell do you think you are doing?" she snapped, her professional composure finally cracking completely. The director straightened up slowly, her expression shifting from friendly to ice-cold in an instant. "I am sorry, you know exactly what you are doing. The touching, the cards, the little comments. I see what is happening here. I watched in fascination as my wife committed professional suicide in real time. Other guests on the terrace had stopped their conversations and were staring at us. I think you need to clarify what you are accusing me of," the director said, her voice deadly calm. "I am not stupid. You have been hitting on my husband all night, and now you are being obvious about it right in front of me." The silence on the terrace was absolute. Even the city noise seemed to fade as everyone processed what they just witnessed. A mid-level employee publicly accusing her regional director of inappropriate behavior. "Let me make sure I understand," the director said slowly. "You are suggesting that my interest in your husband's professional services is somehow inappropriate." My wife realized too late that she had walked into another trap. "That is not what I meant, because that would be a very serious accusation. The kind that would require a formal investigation, the kind that would involve human resources reviewing security footage of this evening to see if there is any evidence of the behavior you are describing." My wife's face went white as she realized what she had done. Security cameras that would show her boss maintaining perfect professional boundaries, while she herself had a public meltdown. I think what my wife is trying to say, I intervened, is that she is feeling a bit overwhelmed by the evening. But the director was not finished. No, I think she said exactly what she meant. She has accused me of sexual harassment in front of witnesses. That is not something that can be walked back with explanations about feeling overwhelmed. Other guests were now openly staring, some pulling out their phones. In the age of social media, this kind of corporate drama would be all over LinkedIn by morning. Please, my wife said, her voice cracking. I did not mean to imply. You did not imply anything. You stated it directly. You accused your regional director of sexually harassing your husband at a company function in front of colleagues with no evidence whatsoever. The director looked around at the gathered crowd, then back at my wife. I think we should continue this conversation in private. Human Resources will want a full report of this incident, including statements from all witnesses. My wife looked like she was about to faint. Cannot we just forget this happened? Forget that an employee made public accusations of sexual misconduct against senior management? I am afraid that is not how professional environments work. She turned to me with a look that was part sympathy, part calculation. I am sorry you had to witness this. Your wife clearly has some personal issues she needs to work through. Then she addressed the crowd that had gathered. I think the evening's excitement is over. Please. Everyone returned to enjoying the party, as people began to disperse, talking in hushed, excited tones about what they just witnessed. My wife grabbed my arm desperately. You have to fix this, she whispered urgently. Talk to her. Explain that I was just stressed. I looked at her for a long moment, this woman who had spent the entire evening treating me like an embarrassment, who had just destroyed her own career because she could not handle another woman showing me basic respect. Fix what exactly? I asked quietly. Your accusation was public. The damage is done. But you could talk to her, smooth things over. She obviously likes you. The irony was beautiful. Now, she wanted me to use the very connection she tried to sabotage all evening to save her from the consequences of her own actions. That is interesting. I said an hour ago you were embarrassed to introduce me to your colleagues. Now, you want me to leverage my relationship with your boss to save your career. She stared at me, finally understanding that something fundamental had shifted between us. Please, she whispered. I patted the business card in my pocket. We will see. But we both knew that the evening had changed everything, and there was no going back to the way things were before. The ride home was silent except for the sound of my wife's occasional sniffling. She kept checking her phone, watching as the corporate gossip network lit up with messages about her very public meltdown. I could see the screen lighting up every few seconds with notifications from coworkers, but she had stopped reading them after the first dozen. 37 messages, she finally said, her voice hollow. 37 messages in 20 minutes. I kept my eyes on the road. That is what happens when you have a breakdown in front of half your department. You could have backed me up. You could have said something. Said what exactly? That your boss was inappropriately touching me? Because that would have been a lie and we both know it. She was quiet for another few blocks. She was flirting with you. Maybe she was, but last I checked, flirting was not a fireable offense. Public accusations of sexual harassment, on the other hand. When we got home, she went straight to her laptop and started typing furiously. I poured myself a whiskey and watched her craft what I assumed was some kind of damage control email. What are you writing? I asked. An apology to her, explaining that I was stressed and misunderstood the situation. You think that is going to work? She looked up at me with desperate eyes. It has to work. Do you have any idea what this could do to my career? She is the regional director. She has influence over every promotion, every assignment, every opportunity in this division. I took a sip of my whiskey and pulled the business card from my pocket, setting it on the kitchen counter where she could see it. Her typing stopped immediately. She gave you her direct number, my wife said quietly. She did. Are you going to call her about the consulting opportunity? I am considering it. That is not what I meant, and you know it. I sat down across from her at the kitchen table. What exactly are you asking me? I am asking if you are planning to have an affair with my boss. That is a hell of a question coming from someone who spent the entire evening acting like she was ashamed to be married to me. She closed the laptop and looked at me directly for the first time since we had gotten home. I was not ashamed. I was just... It is complicated. No, it is really not complicated. You were embarrassed by me. You treated me like I was some kind of liability to your professional image. The only thing that is complicated is watching you try to justify it now. She was clearly interested in you, And that threatened you so much that you destroyed your own career to stop it. The question hung in the air between us. She did not have an answer because we both knew the truth. She had not been protecting our marriage. She had been protecting her ego. My phone buzzed with a text message. I glanced at it and could not help but smile slightly. "Who is it?" she asked immediately. "Your boss, actually. She wants to set up a meeting to discuss the consulting contract." My wife's face went pale again. "When?" "Tomorrow afternoon, her office." "You cannot be serious." "Why not? It is a legitimate business opportunity, unless you think I should turn down work because you had a jealous fit." She stared at me like she was seeing me for the first time. "This is not just about business and you know it. You are right. It is about respect. Tonight, for the first time in months, someone treated me like I mattered. Someone saw value in what I had to offer instead of acting like I was some embarrassing secret to be managed. I do not act like that. Really, when was the last time you introduced me to someone and sounded proud? When was the last time you talked about me to your friends the way you talk about your yoga instructor or your book club?" She opened her mouth to respond, then closed it. We both knew she could not answer that question. "I am going to that meeting tomorrow," I continued, "and I am going to seriously consider whatever she offers me, because right now the idea of working with someone who values my expertise sounds a hell of a lot better than coming home to someone who treats me like an inconvenience." "What about us?" she asked quietly. "What about us? You made it pretty clear tonight where your priorities are, your career, your image, your professional reputation, everything except the man you married." My phone buzzed again. Another message. "Let me guess," my wife said bitterly. "More business opportunities." I read the message and felt the dynamic between us shift even further. "Actually, it is an invitation to dinner tomorrow night, after our business meeting." The silence that followed was deafening. "Are you going?" she whispered. I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw not the confident woman I had married, but someone who had been taking me for granted for so long that she had forgotten I had other options. "I am going to the business meeting," I said carefully. "As for dinner, that depends on what? On whether I come home tomorrow to a wife who remembers why she married me, or to someone who is still more concerned about her professional image than her marriage." I stood up and headed toward the stairs. "I am going to bed. You can finish your apology email, but understand this. I am done being apologetic for existing in your life." As I climbed the stairs, I could hear her crying softly at the kitchen table. But for the first time in months, her tears were not my problem to solve. The business card was still on the counter, and tomorrow I was going to find out exactly what opportunities were waiting for a man who had finally stopped accepting less than he deserved. The question was not whether my wife's career could survive her public meltdown. The question was whether our marriage could survive the fact that someone else had reminded me what it felt like to be wanted. I woke up to the sound of my wife on a frantic phone call in the kitchen. It was barely 7 o'clock in the morning, but apparently the corporate damage control had started early. "Yes, I understand the seriousness of the situation," she was saying, her voice strained. "I take full responsibility for my inappropriate outburst." I made coffee and listened to her grovel to what sounded like someone from Human Resources. The conversation lasted 20 minutes and ended with her agreeing to attend a disciplinary meeting that afternoon. After she hung up, she sat at the kitchen table staring at her phone like it might explode. "Mandatory sensitivity training," she said without looking up. 6 weeks and a formal reprimand in my file. "Could have been worse," I said, pouring my coffee. "Could have been worse. My career is over. No one is going to trust me with important clients after this. I will be stuck in middle management forever. Maybe you should have thought about that before accusing your boss of sexual harassment in front of half the company." She looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes. "Are you enjoying this?" "I am not enjoying anything. I am just not surprised that actions have consequences." My phone rang. The caller ID showed the regional director's name. "Good morning," I answered. "Good morning. I hope I am not calling too early, but I wanted to confirm our meeting today. 2 o'clock worked for you?" "Perfect. Excellent. And about dinner afterward, I was thinking somewhere quiet where we can talk without interruptions. I know a place." I glanced at my wife, who was hanging on every word. "That sounds ideal. Wonderful. I am looking forward to it. See you at 2. After I hung up, my wife stared at me with a mixture of fear and anger. "You are really going through with this?" "Going through with what? A business meeting? Do not pretend this is just business. She is clearly interested in more than your consulting services." I sat down across from her. "And what if she is? What exactly gives you the right to object? I am your wife. Are you? Because lately it feels more like I am some embarrassing roommate you are stuck with." She was quiet for a long moment. Then she tried a different approach. What if I change? What if I make more effort to include you in my work life? You mean like you should have been doing for the past 2 years? I know I have made mistakes, but we can work through this. We can go to counseling. I almost laughed. Now you want counseling? After spending months making me feel like I was the problem. Please just cancel the meeting. We can figure this out together. I stood up and headed for my office. I am not canceling anything. You made your choices last night. Now I am making mine. The rest of the morning passed in tense silence. My wife left for her disciplinary meeting looking like she was heading to her own execution. I spent the time reviewing my consulting portfolio and preparing for what might actually turn into something significant. At 1:30, I put on my best suit and checked myself in the mirror. I looked good, confident, like a man who knew his worth. The regional director's office was in a gleaming downtown tower, 30 floors up, with a view that probably cost more than most people's annual salaries. Her assistant showed me in at exactly 2 o'clock. She stood up from behind a massive desk, and I was struck again by how commanding her presence was today. She wore a navy blue suit that somehow made her look both professional and devastating. "Thank you for coming," she said, gesturing to a seating area away from her desk. "Can I offer you anything? Coffee? Something stronger? Coffee is fine." She poured 2 cups from an expensive-looking machine and settled into the chair across from me. "Before we discuss business, I want to address what happened last night. Your employee's breakdown, your wife's unprofessional behavior. Yes. I want you to know that whatever happens between us, business or otherwise, her situation will not be affected by it. Her consequences are based entirely on her own actions. I appreciate the clarification." "Good. Now, about your consulting services. I have been reviewing your portfolio and I am genuinely impressed. We have some operational inefficiencies that could benefit from your expertise." For the next hour, we discussed legitimate business opportunities. She was not just making conversation. She knew her company's problems and understood how my skills could address them. The contract she outlined was substantial, potentially 6 months of work at rates that would significantly boost my income. But underneath the professional discussion, there was something else. The way she looked at me when she thought I was not paying attention, the way she found reasons to lean closer when reviewing documents, the subtle touches when passing papers. "This is a substantial opportunity," I said finally. "It is, but I want to be completely transparent with you about my motivations." She sat down her coffee cup and looked at me directly. "I am attracted to you. I was last night and I am now. I think you are intelligent, confident, and completely wasted on someone who does not appreciate what she has." The directness was refreshing after years of my wife's passive-aggressive communication style. "That is quite an admission. I do not believe in games. Life is too short and I am too busy. I want you to take this consulting contract because you are genuinely the right person for the job. But I also want you to understand that my interest goes beyond professional collaboration." She stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city below. "Your wife made a fool of herself last night because she recognized a threat she has been ignoring for too long. The question is, what are you going to do about it?" I joined her at the window. "What exactly are you proposing?" "I am proposing that you stop settling for someone who treats you like a liability and start exploring what it would be like to be with someone who sees you as an asset." She turned to face me close enough that I could see the gold flecks in her eyes. "I am not asking you to make any decisions today, but I am asking you to dinner tonight where we can discuss possibilities, both professional and personal." The weight of the moment settled between us. This was not just about attraction or opportunity. This was about choosing between accepting the status quo and demanding something better. "Dinner sounds perfect," I said. She smiled, and for the first time in months, I felt like I was exactly where I belonged. "Excellent. 8 o'clock. I will text you the address." As I left her office, I realized that I was not just considering a new business contract. I was considering a completely new life. And for the first time in years, that possibility did not scare me. It excited me. Dinner was everything my marriage had not been in years. Real conversation, genuine laughter, and the intoxicating feeling of being truly seen by someone who understood my value. By 10 o'clock, we were walking through the hotel lobby where it all started. But this time, I was not the embarrassed accessory. I was the man a successful, beautiful woman had chosen to spend her evening with. "Your wife called the office 6 times today," she mentioned as we reached the elevator. "Apparently, she is quite concerned about our meeting. I am sure she is." "Are you going home tonight?" The question hung in the air as the elevator climbed to her floor. When the doors opened, she stepped out and turned back to me. "The choice is yours." I looked at this woman who had shown me more respect in 2 days than my wife had in 2 years. Someone who saw opportunity where my wife saw embarrassment. Someone who valued what I brought to the table instead of treating it like a burden. "I have made my choice," I said, stepping out of the elevator. The next morning, I returned home to find my wife waiting in the living room, still wearing yesterday's clothes. "Where were you?" she asked, though her voice suggested she already knew. "Making a decision about my future with her, with someone who appreciates what she has." "Yes." She started crying, but this time her tears felt manipulative rather than genuine. "We can fix this. I will change. I will do whatever it takes." "It is too late for that. You had years to figure out what you wanted from this marriage, and you chose to be embarrassed by me instead of proud of me." "I was never embarrassed." "Stop. We both know that is not true." I pulled out divorce papers I had drawn up months ago, but never had the courage to serve. "I am done accepting less than I deserve. You cannot be serious. You are throwing away 8 years for some workplace fling. I am not throwing anything away. You already did that when you decided I was not worth basic respect." As I headed upstairs to pack, she followed me, pleading and bargaining. But I had already moved beyond her reach. 3 months later, I was running efficiency consulting for the regional office, making more money than I had ever imagined. My divorce was final. My ex-wife had been transferred to a smaller branch after her performance review disaster, and I was dating a woman who introduced me to people like I was her greatest accomplishment. Last week, my ex-wife sent a text asking if we could talk about us. I deleted it without responding. Some doors, once closed, should stay that way permanently. Our story has come to an end. If you have made it this far, how about subscribing to our channel? It helps us immensely. I have selected 2 other videos for you that I'm sure you will enjoy. Feel free to click on them. I will be waiting for you in the next story. See you soon.